busy on his phone.
Can I just switch the clicker so that I have, this one's having trouble talking to my computer, or maybe they're just on the outs and they have a riff that I don't know about. I didn't check in with them ahead of time.
They're not friends on Facebook.
They're not friends on Facebook. Thank you so much. Oh, he tried again. Maybe use this one. Will he do it? No, I know. Okay. All right. So people tend to write like the thing, whatever it is, the product, the sheltering animal, the work team, the worker, better when they're thinking about the good parts than when they're thinking about the bad parts. This kind of research has been conducted across a whole range of different disciplines in the behavioral sciences. So political science, economics, psychology, marketing, and taken together, all of this research across all of these different domains seems to converge on the same key finding. What people think about something, what they do, depends on how information is currently described or framed. It does depend on that. Really? I have a slide. Yes. So, is the talk going well? I've managed to get through many slides and click on many things. And I'm just going to focus on that rather than... All right, so this research, if you take a step back and you say, what does this whole research literature seem to show? What it seems to show is that the current context has an immense amount of power to shape how we think about something, right? And one implication or assumption underlying that literature could then be that people are happy when they see a gain frame and sad when they see a loss frame. That it's really easy for us to bounce from one to another. But that assumption hadn't actually ever been tested until quite recently. And so we were interested in testing that assumption, whether people can actually switch back and forth, or maybe they get stuck in one way of thinking about things. It seems like an important question to ask, this question of what happens when information is framed in different ways across time. Because in the real world, people don't just encounter a single frame like they do in the research lab, right? In the real world, information is often repeatedly framed and then reframed before people act on it. So you might have one slide that refuses to advance and then another slide that does advance successfully. You might be listening to somebody in your organization talk about a new disaster preparation plan in terms of the number of human or animal deaths that it would prevent, and then hear somebody else talk about that same plan in terms of the number of lives that would be saved. Right? Or you might be browsing the morning headlines and come across one article that talks about a new policy or program in terms of the number of workers who have kept their jobs, and then see a different headline that talks about the percentage of workers who have lost their jobs under that same policy. Okay? So we wondered what happens in these kinds of situations. Do people really just bounce back and forth, or do they get stuck in one way of thinking about it? Does one of these frames, one of these mental labels, seem to stick more in the mind? There's reason to think that at least some kinds of mental labels can be cognitively or mentally sticky in this way. That once we've thought about something in a certain way, that way of thinking about it can lodge in our heads and resist attempts to change it later on. There's research on creativity that uses a paradigm called the Dunker Candle problem that illustrates this idea nicely. So if you're in a study that uses this paradigm, what happens is you walk into the lab, you walk into a room, and you see on the table in front of you a candle, a box of tacks, and some matches. And your job, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to first light the candle, and then figure out a way to affix it to the wall in such a way that no wax drops onto the table below. Any ideas for how to solve the problem? So here's the funniest solution I've seen to this problem. And here is the correct solution. Oh. Notice though why it's so hard to solve that problem, why it stumps most people for quite some we wondered whether the same thing could happen with gain and loss frames. Once you think about something as a gain or a loss, does that way of thinking about it stick? Now, if it does, or if it can be mentally sticky in that way, there's reason to think that loss frames would be especially sticky. And that's because there is an adaptive and very general human tendency to prioritize safety and potential negatives in our environment. The logic here, evolutionarily speaking, is that if you're considering a visit to the prehistoric pond, and you can think of this as either potentially aggregating a tiger or potentially getting a drink, it's useful, it's adaptive, it's good for your ongoing existence, for the tiger conceptualization to stick once you've thought about it. You don't want to forget all about the possibility of a tiger because you're so focused on the possibility of getting a drink. So once you've thought about something as a potential loss, that way of thinking about it might tend to lodge in your head and be difficult to change later on. So in this research, we drew on these ideas to predict that loss frames may be stickier than gain frames in shaping people's thinking. More specifically, we thought that the effects of a loss frame might linger longer than those of a gain frame when information is subsequently reframed, and that this would happen perhaps because it's more difficult for people to mentally convert a loss framed concept into a gain framed concept than to move in the opposite direction, to convert from gains into losses. So one of the first experiments that we conducted to test these predictions, we wanted to look at how shifting, how switching from one frame to another would affect how people feel about an issue. And we focused in this first case on a surgical procedure, but you can substitute any other issue in here. We've done a whole bunch. You see the same pattern, and I'll show you a few different examples. So in this case, we were focusing on the surgical procedure. Participants came into the lab, and we asked them to imagine that a national panel is evaluating a recently developed surgical procedure that involves new robotic technology. We said a 3-year study evaluating the procedure has just concluded, and then we randomly assigned participants to one of two conditions that varied only in what they saw next. In the gain frame first condition, we said experts agree that the survival rate for the surgical procedure is 70%. In the loss frame first condition, we said experts agree that the mortality rate for the surgical procedure is 30%. So 70% of the glass is full or 30% of the glass is empty. And then we asked participants to rate how positive versus negative they felt about this procedure by moving a slider along some scales that looked like this. Now we know from decades of framing research what should happen if we just stopped right here at time 1, when people have seen a single frame. And what should happen is that people should like the procedure more when it's described in terms of its success rate, survival rate, compared to when it's described in terms of its mortality rate. And these are our actual data. That's exactly what we see. People like the procedure when it's described in terms of gains. They don't really like it when it's described in terms of losses. But we didn't stop here. We kept going. And what we did next was we gave participants what we called additional information. It was really just exactly the same information, framed in the opposite way from what they had seen before. So people who had seen a gain frame at time 1 now saw the information reframed in terms of losses. And people who had seen a loss frame at time 1 now saw the information reframed in terms of gains. And then we said again, how do you feel about this procedure? And they rated how they felt now. Let's pause here and just take a moment to think about what we should expect to find if people just respond to the frame that's right in front of see a pattern of results that probably will look very familiar. When the framing switches from gain to loss, people's preferences follow. They like the current governor when his record is described in terms of successes, and they don't really like him anymore when that same record is reframed in terms of losses. Say that right? Gains to losses. In contrast, when you start out on the loss side of the scale, again, people seem to get stuck in the negative frame. People don't like the current governor when his record is described in terms of losses. In fact, they prefer his opponent. And when his record is reframed in terms of gains, they still don't like him at all. Okay, one final example. This time we asked participants to evaluate 2 new policies that could potentially lead to a certain number of teachers' jobs being saved in one condition or lost in the other. And you can see here again the same pattern of results. So a big change in preferences when the framing switches from gain to loss, a small change in preferences when the framing switches from loss to gain. The loss frame in general across lots of different kinds of scenarios just seems to stick. Okay, our next question was, why does this happen? And could it be that it's actually harder mentally for people to convert from a loss frame to a gain frame than to move in the opposite direction, to convert from a gain into a loss? Is it just easier to go from good to bad than it is to go from bad to good? So we designed another study to test this idea. In this next study, we told people to imagine that there's been an outbreak of an unusual disease and 600 lives are at stake. In one condition, we asked participants, okay, if 100 lives are saved, then how many will be lost? In the other condition, we said, okay, if 100 lives are lost, how many will be saved? So everybody just has to calculate 600 minus 100 and come up with the answer of 500. But whereas participants in one condition have to go from gains to losses in order to get that answer, participants in the other condition have to go from losses to gains. We timed how long it took them to solve that simple problem. And here's what we found. When the simple math problem, that calculation, required participants to convert from gains to losses, they could answer the question pretty quickly. It took them about 7 seconds on average. In contrast, when the same problem required them to switch from loss to gain, it took them a lot longer, nearly 11 seconds on average. So once people start to think about something in terms of potential losses, that way over this 10-week time period. So their self-report of physical symptoms. And you can see that reported physical symptoms were lower for participants in the grateful condition than they were in either of the other two conditions. So people in this condition were actually having the experience of feeling physically healthier across this time of 10-week period. The same researchers ran another study where they asked participants to spend a few minutes each day for 2 weeks writing about things that they were grateful for instead of doing it in these a lot of research in psychology now on happiness and well-being that provides a whole array of potentially useful tools for dealing with this kind of situation. One really simple one that we probably don't appreciate enough is exercise. Exercise obviously has all the physical benefits, blah, 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 get off the couch, go for a run, but it has a host of psychological benefits as well. So daily exercise can buffer you against negativity in general, but it's also a good way to break
good news and I've got some bad news.
Only want the good news, I don't want to hear any bad news.
That is my question. Which would you like to hear first? And is there a study on maybe have people been asked, if given the choice,